Okay. To help us understand this week's material, I'm going to jump straight into a PowerPoint I put together a few years ago for a counselor supervisor training. And it's basically if you're a counselor supervisor, you're helping people that are going toward their licensure and helping them work through problems. So this was given as a tool to supervisors and also counselor educators. So let me go ahead and share my screen and let's see if we can delve into the material. So, a values-based conflict. Why values-based conflict is relevant to our class here. I could argue that this is also relevant to an ethics class. In ethics class, you have decision models for ethical dilemmas. What we found in the counseling profession is oftentimes people feel like they're in a dilemma when they're asked to provide care for people that they might struggle with due to internalized prejudices. And sometimes those prejudices can be built on like religiously held values, deeply held values. So we're going to talk about that. What if that's you? What if you're in a situation where you have some really deeply held beliefs and you're worried about and hopefully you have the self-awareness that, okay, yeah, this is probably not a good group for me to work with. So let's talk a little bit about that in this process. I'm going to talk about an award-winning case study from the American Counseling Association from 2018. And so let's walk through this a bit. You're welcome to look at these, the mission statement, which we've already looked at in this class, the code of ethics I've included for this lecture in the module this week for module 8. So if we're looking at effective techniques in counseling, and we're looking at if you've had strategies and techniques, you know this a little bit from me, um, that they modified counselor research in the past 2 decades, counselor education based on this research from Wampold. And what Wampold found, he was looking for what's the most effective technique in counseling. Is it behaviorism? Is it CBT? Is it EMDR? Is it, what is the most effective technique you can use? And what Wampold found was that there's not really one that's head and shoulders above the other, but counseling is effective. And he found that these 7 common factors are what caused the change. Like the effect size in counseling, why people get better when they go to a counselor, can be attributable largely, mainly 80% of the change is due to these common factors. What these common factors are shared beliefs, expectations, collaboration between the client and the counselor. There's also a belief in the process. You can't show up as a counselor and don't believe that your client can change, and the client also needs to believe in themselves that they can change. There has to be some, belief that you can, make improvement. You have to have shared goals. If your goals are amiss from your client, then they're not going to be good. Empathy has a very, very strong effect size, big effect size for change. It's why we stress it so much in strategies and techniques about the ability to convey empathy, that I am understanding what you're saying to me. And empathy is unconditional positive regard, is warmth, is congruence. My facial expression, my being with you is congruent with and I'm being genuine with you. Genuineness is so important in counseling, and that alliance. So if we're putting this into play with this week's and your midterm has to do with groups that you might have trouble based on your own belief systems counseling. And so if you think about that, even if we start to deal with, how okay, I and so what we talk about, okay, how do we deal with that? How do we get through and how do we deal with that based on from what's in the ACA? So with the ACA, the American Counseling Association, they recommend using, and this is still, it's from 2014, but it is viable to help work through value-based to help you work through values-based conflicts within yourself. I'm trying to find my computer is just crashing out. I'm sorry. Let's continue working. It wanted me to log out. So let's go to our class. Sorry about this. Let's go to multicultural. I had this pulled up and my computer just doesn't run well. And I'll try to make it super big so people can see. We go to our learning modules. 4, week 8. And here are our resources. What the ACA Code of Ethics asks us to do is to use this decision-making model, the CVCM. If we jump into the CVCM relatively quickly, this is it in this 8-page article. If we feel like we're going to have trouble working with someone based on their identity and based on our own values, this is what we do. So step 1, what's the nature of the conflict? Is this a personal thing for me? Or is it a professional thing? All right, what's the value conflict? Is there a professional one or a personal one? Okay, so then I can explore core issues and potential barriers to providing appropriate care. So personal. I need to recognize the role of personal, moral, and or religious biases and the impact of personal life experiences. There's something that gives me a bias against this client that's coming to see me. Is there a reason I may think that I need to refer them out? And then recognize potential barriers and how personal values impede the counseling relationship. So you're exploring this. Professional. Okay, so maybe I'm going to have some countertransference here. Is this going to come across in what I'm saying and what I'm doing? I would argue that if you have a strongly held bias against a group of people, it's going to come across in your nonverbals. It may come across in your verbal responses too. Maybe you've got deficiencies in skills or training, or you're not an expert with this group of people or people from this group. Stage 3, step 3 requires a lot, because if you identify this, then you have some work to do. And so personally, go consult the Code of Ethics. If we consult the Code of Ethics, what it tells us is that we cannot refer a client based on our own deeply held beliefs. It's like if somebody shows up for help, like let's use the example of like somebody who got shot in the leg, and you're an ER doctor. This person is whatever, insert a marginalized group that may be, okay, well, my beliefs tell me that this person's a bad person. I'm not going to treat them. That's not ethical, right? So we have the same idea with being counselors. And so we're required to see people that especially here in rural Oklahoma, rural, settings where counselors are, few and far between. There may not be as many options, particularly if you're in a really small town. You want to consult colleagues, supervisors, in the literature. So the professional literature, I'm sharing that with you right now. There's other literature out there on this. You should seek additional training or supervision. Hey, can you help me work with this group of folks or this particular client that represents? They're from this group of folks. All right, here's the key word for this. All right, so you don't refer out. You utilize ethical bracketing theory. Bracketing is a key word here. So bracketing means, in a nutshell, You recognize that something's coming up for you. I recognize that I have some biases against this group of people. All right, a group, that's this client comes from this group of people. So I'm recognizing that. I'm also, because I'm not able to refer this person out because I would be marginalizing. I would be discriminatory. I'd be discriminating against that person based on who they are. So, to avoid discrimination, I'm going to bracket my own beliefs. I'm going to put them over on the shelf, over there on the, metaphorically, in your mind, putting your own beliefs over there on the shelf, bracketing what you have, setting it aside. Set your own junk aside because it's not about you. It's about the person in front of you that came to you for help. Set your own junk aside and be present. That is easier to say than do, but that is what we are instructed to do. That's the ACA's best model, the best guide. And then we engage in some immersion. Can we get to know that person's culture deeply? Can we look for non-biased sources of information that don't just have a con, confirmatory hypothesis testing, where we're not just looking for information that's going to already, feed our biases. We're not going to our social media feed and everything that aligns with it. We're actually going and seek contradictory information that doesn't align with us, and we're going to immerse ourselves in that. We're going to try to educate ourselves. We're going to consult with our supervisor, and we're going to seek supervision, and we're going to seek personal counseling. How can I work through this? How can I work through this with my beliefs? I believe that I'm going to go to hell if I see this person. If that's where you are, this is deeply held stuff. This is some hard, I know I'm speaking kind of superficially to this and very broadly, but if that's where you are, you really need to question this. And because the professional, this role here as a professional say, okay, that's not something, you can't make those decisions. That license on the wall precludes you from being discriminatory based on your stuff. So I even mentioned, before that we had a student graduate a few years ago that's intentionally choosing not to practice with a license because they respect this. And I have to respect the person and I have to respect their decision to hold themselves to that. And you want to identify ways to, and this is where this maintain your personal religious moral beliefs while still providing effective counseling. That's difficult. It's difficult to do. So there's some professional steps there too. I really hone in on the personal. You're welcome to work through step 4 and step 5. The main thing is when you go to step 5, you want to ensure that proposed actions promote client welfare. Okay, so what are the outcomes that are going to make sure your client is healthy, make sure that your client receives the best care possible? Okay, so read through that. That's important. This is difficult material. Now, going back to my PowerPoint, what I propose from my research, and this is just Randolph now. So here's a let me give you these views do not necessarily reflect the views of the American Counseling Association. I gave you the American Counseling Association bracketing thing. That's the official stance. My own research, my own understanding of people, and I don't know whether I'll publish this or not. I sent it out to be published once. I sent it back for editing. They sent it back to me for editing. I don't know. It was during COVID, and I had some health stuff come up, and I didn't get back to it. So, but this was something that it was being considered for publication. They didn't deny it. They said, let's take a look at this. So these were my thoughts. So my thoughts come from originally authored by the name of Dahlberg. Dahlberg was a a qualitative researcher, and a qualitative researcher that was dealing with something that was really close to their own heart, meaning that I'm asking, like, I'm interviewing people that are similar to me. I could have some countertransference, what we think of as countertransference in my role as a researcher. Bracketing, the idea of bracketing actually comes from the same thing. It comes from qualitative research, where qualitative researchers try to bracket their own biases, where they don't confound their research. They don't, bias their research by having their own, biases come up, and again, that confirmatory hypothesis testing. Bridling is a step deeper. So bracketing says we put it over alongside, right? And we come back to it later, we just bracket it. Bridling says that we can't cut off these thoughts. We can't cut off our deeply held beliefs. We just can't. You just can't. Wahlberg's basically saying you can't bracket. Like, these are so deep, I can't bracket them. And so bridling, that's the idea of bridling, is that we are needing to take a deeper look at things. And what bridling then says, and I have this in the module. So here's my proposition for bridling. So I went ahead and put, this is straight from the article. I didn't, I need to probably cite it, but this is I did right there. So this is straight from the Cossett-Herlihy model, step 3. My proposition for this is to modify step 3 a bit, not to recreate the wheel, but add some depth to it. Because the end here, it says to maintain beliefs. Okay, yeah, that's fine. We don't want, now that's not something I want to do as a counselor educator, is to tear down your beliefs. But I do, that's where the bracketing comes. The bridling thing is almost like, think about a horse, and we're along for the ride, because bridle is like, I'm gonna bridle my beliefs, and I'm gonna acknowledge my beliefs the whole time. I'm gonna be aware of them. I don't want to definitely have my, nonverbal show off on this client. But the bridling is almost like we're along for the ride, so to speak. And being open, being open to transforming your own deeply held beliefs that create or maintain biases. So again, I'm not looking to convert people here at all. That's not my intention. And maybe we're splitting hairs with the words, because it gets pretty close to what I'm saying there with bracketing. But if there's something that's really causing you, I have a hard, here's where this comes from. I have a hard time as somebody who's called to promote social justice and these equality statements and equity statements and things like that. I have a hard time, and especially given my background with theology. So this is where my unique voice is, because I have the background in theology. Is there a way to reconcile? There's a researcher by the name of Gail Minix that looked at this. Is there a way to reconcile your own deeply held beliefs where you're not threatening your salvation or your ideas of salvation, this and that? Is there a way for you to reconcile, bridle your own beliefs, and allow them to be informed by that client that's in front of you? Is there a way that they could possibly transform, if you have an open heart to that person's pain, that person's struggle? Is there a way for you to transform rather than just bracket it off and just, yeah, I'll come back to it? That's where my ideas are with bridling. And I know it's probably it's maybe a minute difference, but I think it's a significant one. So I'll leave you with that for now. That's a lot to chew on. And I didn't give I do want you to read the articles. I do want you to explore the resources. Please There's the exam. I'll go ahead and open it after I release this video because I wanted to give some context to what I'm saying. If you're challenged, if something I said didn't quite make sense, please reach out to me and I'll be glad to try to clarify or add some depth to it. So anyway, I look forward to hearing from you and have a good week. Have a good week this week. Uh, Take care.